Erik Peterson on Williston Trending Topics News Radio Live.
Decided to cut their production on Sunday, and it really set ripples through the oil price as they jumped up very significantly, which is obviously great news for the security here. It's going to increase drilling, and more importantly, it just sets the tone and the message that you really can't push the oil industry around, that they're smarter and that they learned from their past when it was just about drill it and make oil as cheap as you can, that these companies are sitting on mountains of cash and that they are getting support from the cuts from the rest of the world as our global economy is slowing down. So huge news for Western North Dakota specifically.
As spring approaches, well, it's here. You wouldn't know it by looking outside, but
Right.
It's here. How does that affect the housing market?
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, for the first time in months, we've got a little wind at our sails, right? It was always interest rates were too high, oil prices were retreating, and we had this long frozen 7 months of winter. Things are heating up in the housing market specifically with interest rates pulling down a little bit. And really the main concern is now in a global situation is where interest rates are going to go. We believe they're going to come down temporarily. But as you found out, oil prices go up, that's going to put pressure on inflation. The Federal Reserve has already said they're standing by, ready to raise interest rates again. So that's going to be a long-term play. They're going to continue to raise those interest rates to slow inflation down and put pressure. So if you are looking for a house, now is the time. The market is heating up again. We're having multiple bid situations, something very similar to what we had prior to COVID. And really a great story is we had a client last summer buy a house in like that $390,000 range. They had a change in their family situation, so they were looking to sell it. We did a CMA on it, and the market has heated so much up since about mid-March that particular CMA came in the 420,000 range. We had immediate interest within 24 hours. We ended up getting multiple bids and had 4 parties making a run at that particular house, and it went way over asking price. So that just tells you honestly that it's a tight inventory situation. It's a game of musical chairs, as we said consistently. And if you're considering buying a house, now's the time as there's still inventory available before interest rates go up and more people start looking.
Did that situation with that house that you talk about, did that surprise you?
It surprised me at the numbers that it went to. And obviously the concern is going to be appraisals now, right? Like they're going to base everything, these appraisers, off of the last 6 months. So there's a little bit of risk there. It surprised us not that it got action because there's a very, very tight market. Just in the Williston area alone, there's less than 60 houses that I would consider livable. And there's a lot more people looking. We have about 4,100 people that have used our property search website as it's so good in the last year. And there's about 600 of those that are actively looking, checking out properties all the time on a monthly or weekly basis. So there's so many people out there chasing these deals. It's not surprising. But I guess I was most surprised at how many people jumped in there and were willing to overpay again. You're not seeing that anywhere else in the country.
As you talk about this, we look at the oil prices at this moment, WTI crude, right flat for the morning, but it's at 80.62, and Brent crude at 84.87,
Yep.
Also flat in the morning, but being over that $80 mark, and it's been able to keep from going below that the last week or so. That's got to be impressive.
Yeah, it's a lot impressive. It's a far cry from where we were just a year to 15 months ago in the 120 range. But to see a retreat all the way down and break through those psychological numbers and get into the 60s was concerning for most. The fact that it's held its own in the $80 range is very significant. But more importantly, now the pundits, even with lower demand on a global level, are starting to increase their forecast for oil. In fact, last week, Goldman Sachs had said they thought it was going to be in the $90 range. OPEC then cut their production numbers by over 1 million barrels a day. That's a lot of oil. And now they've raised, Goldman Sachs has, one of the largest banks in the world, of course, to $95 a barrel by the end of the year. So even the pundits, even these experts are raising their forecasts as things move forward here. So great news for us, clearly.
You know, we talk about the experts and we talk about the national news, but sometimes I get my best news from folks that are right here in the oil industry. And I was talking yesterday over at Mega Lattes. I was sitting down and talking to a guy who works in the oil fields. He's a supervisor for it. He says all of his rigs are open now. They're pumping. He's very excited about what's going to happen in the next year or so. You say what?
Oh yeah, I say exactly the same thing. We've got a pretty good pulse on the market, especially from these industrial companies. And again, we're seeing longer term leases on these industrial buildings, 5-year leases, paying 20 to 30% more than those were just a couple of years ago. So these oil companies are ramping up. The constraining factor, of course, just like the rest of the country, has always been labor. Somebody that can pass a drug test, put in a good day's work, and help these companies drill more and grow and service these large oil companies. And we're starting to see that again. As you take a look at the rest of the country that's imploding, there are job losses, there's people foreclosed on, and real estate markets across the country in some areas are down 20 to 30%. I just spent last week in Scottsdale at a mastermind from some of the top real estate experts all over the country, and everybody's big question is how is your market? How is the real estate going in your area? Every single person that I talked to said it's down at least 20%. So
do they believe you when you tell them what's going on here?
I don't think so. I think really they're like, you live up in the cold and the frozen tundra. Why do you live up there? Because there's huge economic opportunity. So as we've been predicting for months, as people that haven't paid their mortgage, that are behind on payments, that got laid off at work, that are seeing less money come into their bank accounts on a monthly basis, but watching their expenses go up as inflation's been eating 7, 8, 9% a year off of their disposable income, they're going to have to make a change. There's not a better place to come than North Dakota. So if you're listening to this and you're not in North Dakota, come out here. We need you. We need to put you to work. And that, of course, is going to help us all grow this market, and especially on the real estate side.
And there's lots of national talk, Erik, about the fleeing from regional banks, going to the majors. But you don't think that's very wise when it comes to real estate here in Williston, because the local banks know the market and know the trends.
Yeah, not only do they know the market and know the trends, they're very conservative with their lending practices, and they have a whole bunch of money on deposit now. So CDs are now paying a higher rate than they have in the last decade. So a lot of this money that's sitting in there has to be loaned out. If you want to get a good solid bank that's going to work for you, that's going to go to bat for you, that knows the market and isn't afraid to lend on it, find somebody local that you can sit down with, interview a couple of them. We have banks that have been here over 100 years. And in a lot of cases, North Dakota is, I believe, the only state that has a state-owned bank, the Bank of North Dakota. In a lot of cases, they will come in and help underwrite some of these loans to take off the pressure of these regional banks.
Good information today, as always, Erik. Thank you for stopping by.
Anytime, Tom. Have a good day, sir. Thanks again for having me.
Erik Peterson, Proven Realty EXP. He's with us every Tuesday morning in the 8 o'clock block, but yesterday, with all the activity we had yesterday, Erik agreed to move to this morning, and we'll see him again next Tuesday morning in the 8 o'clock block. 8:46 Coyote Country News. Good morning.